that should obviously be stressed and emphasized is sensitive handling of this whole situation, persuasion, attempts to actually change mindsets and social behavior rather than heavy-handed use of the law. Law often has extremely limited capacity to change behavior. Since independence, we've had a lot of customary practices that have been outlawed. But the actual position on the ground in terms of observance of those laws and enforcement of those laws is often very limited. We think, okay, well, we just pass a new law, we outlaw something, we criminalize it, and then we've got an answer to all the problems. That's obviously very short-sighted, and it's also inaccurate. What we need to consider is, does law have a role to play in this particular area? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to explore what the situation could be from the standpoint of utilization of the law. Always bearing in mind that law has a very limited function, in my estimation, in this particular area. So we start from what we've been hearing previously. Apostolic beliefs prohibiting modern medicine can be extremely harmful to maternal and neonatal health. Beliefs deeply ingrained and intermingled with norms and practices derived from culture and traditional African society are deeply entrenched, as we've been hearing from Brian. We can't just wish those away. We can't ignore them. People have been brought up with those beliefs. They strongly adhere to them. They believe that they are part of their culture, part of their religion, and they are deeply entrenched. What we're most concerned about, I think, are pregnant women in ultra-conservative apostolic sects who are only able to receive assistance from traditional birth attendants at home or in traditional birth camps, often in very unhygienic conditions. Now, these people obviously are put in a lot of jeopardy, and we need to, obviously, as previous speakers have been saying, address those issues in the right way. The whole issue of the dangers that attach to unhygienic, non-skilled attempts to assist people, assist women through pregnancy and after birth are obviously problematical. If we have the ability to obviously persuade religious leaders to accept modern health conditions and treatment techniques, we've got a different scenario. But if those beliefs do not change, and the end result is serious birth complications where women may die, when medical intervention before, during, or after childbirth could have prevented such deaths, we're very much concerned. Where maternal and neonate deaths may have been avoided through effective medical identification and management of problems of pregnancy by access to emergency obstetric care to deal with birth complications. This is something we're concerned about. And within the apostolic community, child marriages of young girls to very much older men are prevalent. Now, what we have been seeing is increasing pressure to say child marriages are bad news. UNICEF has actually described child marriages as representing perhaps the most prevalent form of sexual abuse and exploitation of girls. We are seeing a situation arising where all sorts of people are coming out into the open and saying child marriages in Zimbabwe should end. Chief Charambira recently threw his full weight behind the idea that child marriages should in fact no longer take place within Zimbabwe. And the campaign to end child marriages was very much to the fore when the Council of Chiefs were meeting just recently. We've had all sorts of other people coming out in open condemnation of child marriages. Recently the President Mugabe, said that child marriages were a form of exploitation and government was considering dealing with child marriages by way of setting a minimum age for marriage. We've also seen that the AU, SADC, various other regional bodies are planning a whole campaign to end child marriages. So the issue then becomes, well, if child marriages, the minimum age for marriage is set, for both customary marriages and also marriages under the Marriage Act, what impact will that have upon behavioural patterns within the Apostolic faith? Now that's an issue that I think we need to really probe. Again, I think we have to be realistic though. If government finally does set a minimum age for marriage, or the Constitutional Court has before it at the moment a constitutional case challenging child marriages, what is going to be the enforcement of that? Because it's all very well to actually have a constitutional decision saying child marriages are unconstitutional for various constitutional reasons. But at the end of the day, to what extent is that law going to be enforced and take hold within the communities when it's a widespread practice? In looking at law in this context, I think that we've got to look at both the Constitution and also various conventions to which we are signatories, conventions that we ratify. Constitutional rights that we're looking at are right to life, bodily integrity, right to healthcare services, right to access to reproductive healthcare services, right of children to education. All of these fit within the framework of what we're discussing. All laws, customs, traditions, and cultural practices that infringe constitutional rights of women are void to the extent of the infringement, and no person may participate in cultural life in a way that threatens or violates the fundamental rights of other people. We have all sorts of obligations under international treaties that we ratify. The starting point is with the Convention provision that everyone has the right to the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health. State parties must reduce infant and child mortality. Must take measures to eliminate discrimination against women in rural areas and must ensure that such women have the right of access to adequate health care facilities, including family planning services. Ensure that marriage is only entered into with the full consent of the parties. That's an issue that arises. Forced marriages, pledging girls in marriage, are in fact criminal offences within Zimbabwe. Take action to promote enrolment and retention of girls in schools. Now there is scope for constitutional challenges to some of the practices that are taking place within hardline, ultra-conservative, apostolic sects. But as I say at the bottom there, constitutional intervention is limited in its scope and has various problems attaching to it. But we see that constitutional challenge can in fact have an impact in certain areas. For instance, in respect of the child marriages issue. Now, I'd just like to track through the freedom of religion argument, which often confuses people. People have freedom of religion, yes. They can also decide upon the upbringing of their children according to their religious beliefs. What they can't do is to actually use their beliefs to prejudice the rights of others. Now, if you take parent-child, a person in the apostolic faith may believe that medical intervention is totally immoral, unacceptable, and should not take place. That person can decline to have medical treatment. But the problem arises where they actually impose those ideas upon their children. Because what the law says, basically, is that we're there to look at the physical welfare, the fundamental rights of others, including the right of access to necessary health care. So parents and guardians of minor children have the right to determine moral and religious upbringing, but they must not do this in a manner that prejudices constitutional rights of children, including the right of health, safety and welfare. And the idea here is that the parent must not violate the child's right to life. And this is supported by the constitutional provisions. And then when you take the further criminal law provisions will exist. Basically, there is a duty, a protective duty, between parent and child. So if the practice concerned is jeopardizing the actual physical health of the child concerned, then it is in fact a criminal offense.